If you're new to my channel, my name is Christina, and in this week's video I really wanted to share 4 easy, beginner-friendly DIYs. I'll talk you through the process, so let's jump into the video. I've never made my own curtains before, and I really wanted to give it a go and see what I could do. I'm also going to apply these grommets to the panels. I definitely have a few curtains I'd like to make throughout the home, and I'm going to be using the Annie Sloan fabrics, and I'm going to be demonstrating in the Antoinette and the Old White. I've seen so many people make their own curtains for their home, so I really would like to try it for myself as I've never done it before. With owning this old Victorian home, I noticed that the principal windows throughout this house are absolutely huge, and they're very tall, and finding curtain panels that actually go from the top to the bottom is very tricky to find, so this is a good way to make your own. So I just drew out exactly what I was going to need in the square meter of fabric and how I was going to make my folds, and I'll talk you through it. It's really easy. First thing I did was lay out the fabrics. This way I could cut 9 feet. I'm actually going to need 8.5, but I need that little extra for my folds. So I first cut out the 9 feet that I needed, and I've also cut out 4 feet width for these panels, so there'll be 2. So what's important is making sure you give yourself a little extra fabric all the way around your panels, because what we're going to need to do is fold in about 3 inches from the bottom, and I'm also going to be folding in around the sides. So I'll be making 2 folds of 1 inch all the way around, and I'll be pinning everything. I also made 4 inches of the top. Now you're going to need 4 because those grommets are around 2 inches. So we're going to need 4 just so we can have them nice and even. So as you can see, they're about 2 inches, and we're going to have a fold of 4 inches. So they should be placed nice and center, nice and evenly. I have this little Cricut iron which will be perfect, and I can just fold those seams that I want to make on the side. So again, I'm going to do 2 folds at 1 inch each. Because the panels are so wide and so long, it just really helps to have the fold, so that way when I run it through the sewing machine, it should actually kind of stay in place a little bit easier, keeping my seam nice and straight. This is a beautiful, heavy, thick linen fabric, and I actually decided to go around and just make a remeasure just to make sure, because the panels were so long, that nothing shifted. Once I had everything set in place, now I'm going to run it through the sewing machine. And when I start a seam, I usually like to do a back stitch and then carry forward all the way down. Once I get to the bottom, I'll do another back stitch. It just makes the seam a little bit stronger. For the sides, I just did 1 actual seam, and then for the upper and lower folds I did 2 seams across, and again it just made it a little bit more secure. And I am an amateur at sewing. I don't really know a lot about sewing, but I'm definitely going to be learning. This was a perfect example of something that would be easier to make, because I almost need to kind of make my own custom sizing for these windows. I could find lots of length panels for sale, but it always seemed to be about 1.5 feet shorter than what I was looking for. So when in doubt, always make your own. Plus, if you find your own perfect fabric that's going to suit your style as well as your color outline that you have, you're good to go if you can just make your own panels. So this grommet set was perfect because the little circle in the back is actually what you're going to use as a template, and it shows you right on the back exactly how you're going to do it. So first thing I did was measure the width of my panel, and then I placed the grommets in symmetry, so they had almost like a 6-inch parting in between, so everything was all in line for where I will now make the circles. The circle itself on the back of the actual package is a little tiny bit smaller than the actual grommet, because your fabric will actually fit nice and snug in there. So once I had all the circles ready, all I'm going to do first is I'm going to cut a little slit inside that circle, and that will allow me to get my scissors in there and cut a nice little circle all the way around my template that I drew. Once I had the circle cut out, I can just grab the grommet, and you're going to want the raised part, and then you're going to take the flat part and it should snap right into place. It's that easy. The curtain panel set only took me a couple of hours to make, so it's a very quick, easy, and very rewarding project to make on your own. But there's also little small teeth, and I was trying to show that on camera, that they actually snap in, so it's very secured. But you definitely want to make sure that your fabric is nice and firmly tight around the grommet, and this way it's going to have a nice seamless look. You can also find some beautiful fabrics on sale, and you can get it for really inexpensive. So again, this is a great project if you want to make customized colorings and styles for around your home. The striped ticking fabric that I have, I'm definitely going to be making another pair of curtains for an upcoming bedroom makeover that I'm really looking forward to sharing with you soon. A quick DIY afternoon project, and now I have my own custom curtain panels. So I really wanted to try some new throw pillow ideas just with using hand knit ideas. And I love the super chunky yarn. And this is by Barnett. It's the big blanket. So first thing I'm going to do is cast on 14 stitches. So I made a slip knot, and now I'm just going to pull through each loop, making 14 stitches. And the whole thing is just done with your fingers. This is such a super soft, cuddly type of material yarn to use, and it stitches up in no time. This pillow only took me an hour to make. So I'm going to flip over my cast on stitches here, and I'm going to use that little bump in the middle, so that way I can pull up my first row of official stitches from my cast on. I try to aim my stitch sizes to be about, I would say, about 3 inches. You want them kind of loose so that way you can keep pulling in the yarn because it's so thick and chunky. I really wanted to challenge myself with something a little bit different, and I thought I would try this Zig Zag kind of stitch. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing out of 2. So think of it as 2 stitches, and you're going to zig and zag. That's what I call it. So from the left to the right, you're going to do the right stitch first, then the left. So think of it in 2s. You have an even number of 14 stitches, so 2, 2, 2, and 2, and so on. And you're going to be doing the right stitch first, then the left out of the 2. And that's going to create this zigzag. It could also be referred to as a cross stitch. So you're going to do the right one first, then the left one. So you're going to zig, then you're going to zag. The stitch itself is a simple knit stitch. You're just twisting over the stitches, creating that zigzag. So I started from the left, now I'm moving to the right. So again, you're going to use your right stitch out of the 2, then you're going to cross the left stitch over it. So when you get to the very end, it's just the way the zigs and the zags or the crossover stitching works, that when you finish your last one, so you've got that end crossover, that zigzag, what you're going to do is put that working yarn, because now we're going to go from right back over to the left. But you can't, based on this design, kind of start from that end. So I just do 1 knit stitch and I leave the one at the end just kind of, but we're going to cross it over when we come back the other way. So if I tried to do it, it just wasn't going to create a nice symmetry to the pattern. So I'm just going to start over to the next 2. And we're going to be doing the same thing, but we're kind of doing it going obviously from right to left. Now, because I'm going the other way, you're actually going to take the same concept, but you're going in reverse. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do the left stitch, then the right stitch, just going in 2s. So we're kind of doing that zigzag, but the other way. So it's just kind of following along, even if you have to kind of rewind the video if you wanted to participate along making the exact same pattern, but it's just knowing that you're doing the same thing but you're going the other way. Now that I'm at the end, again, it's the way the pattern works. I can still cross over the far left side and the pattern seems to work. So I can do the right stitch first, then I can do the left stitch, but it's because I'm going from left to right. It's just how the pattern sequence works. So again, you're just crossing over 2 stitches. So I'm going to take the right one, stitch that one first, then take the left one, and then stitch that. It's just the way we've crossed them over. So I was really hoping that by kind of explaining it in stitches of 2, it would help make sense. So I'm just finishing the 3rd row over, and I just crossed that over. But again, because of that design, I'm just going to, as I'm going back from right to left, I'm just going to do 1 knit stitch to the one adjacent, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing again in reversed. So I will be doing the left stitch, then the right stitch. You're going to need 2 balls of the big Barnett chunky big blanket to do this full throw pillow, and I'm using a 20 by 20 pillow. But as you can see, once you've got that crossover down, it goes very, very quickly. Like I mentioned, this pillow took me less than an hour to make because the row stitch up so fast. So again, I'm going right to left, so I'm just going to do a knit stitch into that 2nd stitch and leave that one at the bottom. We will zigzag that when we come back from the left to the right. But going right to left, we're just going to knit stitch the 2nd one in there, leave it, and then I'm going to do the left stitch first, then I'm going to do the right stitch. And again, just going in sections of 2 stitches. If you need to add a new ball of yarn, it's really easy just to tie these yarns together. You're just going to tie it into a nice tight knot, pulling from all 4 sides, and then you're just going to cut off those tails. I was just using yarn that I had left over, so I had enough to tie 2 together, which pretty much gave me a full panel. But 1 ball should give you a full panel, and I'll be making 2. Now I made the zigzag just for the top. Now what I'm going to do is cast off, and it's so easy. You just take 1 loop, sandwich the one right beside it, and pull your working yarn through. So you're creating this braid on the top. So you're taking 2 stitches and creating 1, and as you keep going, it creates a nice even braid at the top. And then as soon as you get to the very end, you're going to end up having 1 stitch left over. Just cut your leftover yarn off, pull it through, pull it nice and tight, and then what you can do is just weave it in. You can cut the tail a little bit shorter if you wanted to, but I just generally will weave it in, and plus we're making a pillow, so if it does dangle in the back, it's going to be on the inside of the pillow. For the back side of the pillow, I'm just going to do a regular knit stitch, and I cast it on the 14 stitches exactly the same way I did with the zigzag panel. So I'm just going to carry it through. I'm going to make the exact same amount of rows to match my pillow. And the amount of rows you're going to need, and even the width, so your starting chain, will depend on the pillow size that you want to use. I find the easiest way is when you're chaining on your casting on those stitches, is just run it across the pillow and give yourself a gauge of how many stitches you're going to need to have a nice cover panel for your pillow size. So I'm going to turn these panels around and get them set up so I can put my pillow insert, and then I can weave it together. Now because this is really thick, chunky yarn, all I'm going to do is find the outer stitch of each panel, and I'm just going to weave it back and forth to the bottom panel. So it's just kind of creating this wave all through the upper and lower panels, and then they're going to be weaved together. Once you've weaved all the way around the pillow, then just tie a really nice firm knot, and then you can either cut the tail or you can put it inside the actual pillowcase. I absolutely adore finger crocheting. It's really easy, and if you don't have any experience, not to worry. I'll walk you through it. It's very simple. I'm going to be using the Easy Wool. It's an acrylic and wool blend, and this is also washable. First thing I've done is made a slip knot, and I'm just going to be using my fingers, and I'm going to be pulling the working yarn through each loop. You're going to kind of want to make it about an inch in size for each of your loops as you're making your chain. So as I keep chaining on, what I try to do is hold my left hand is actually holding the chain as I'm pulling through each loop that I'm making, and it just kind of helps stabilize it. So similar, I'm going to be using a 20 by 20 pillow insert, and I find the best way to gauge it is just keep making your chain and just kind of aligning it across until you feel comfortable that you have enough stitches. So for this pillow and this yarn, I'm going to cast on 24 stitches. And because each of the loops that I'm creating with this chain is about an inch, and I'm working with a 20-inch pillow in width. So all I want to do is a single finger crochet, and you're going to go into the stitch with a loop on your hand. You'll have 2 loops, pull through both with the working yarn. So just by watching, it's that easy. That's all you're going to do. There's nothing else to this pattern, exactly what you see. Keep going into your chain, into that top loop. You're going to have a loop on your finger, so that means you're going to have 2 loops. Pull it, then you'll have 1 loop remaining. And of course, don't forget, we are using 2 balls of the yarn at the same time. That's what's really going to give it its bulk, and it's also going to stitch up very quickly. Also, that first slip knot is still counted as a stitch. When you're doing a single crochet, it's really important to add a stitch at the end of each row, then flip your work over. So really it just looks like a big braid at the top. And as you can see, we're using 2 yarns at the same time, but that only counts as 1 loop. So there's 2 little bumps, looks like a braid. We're going into both of those at the top here. So just by watching my fingers here, I have a loop on my finger, and now I'm going into 2 of those loops, pulling out a loop, removing both of those loops with my working yarn. But that's what's so easy about this single crochet. Is just, as you can see, there's 2 bumps at the top there. That's going to be considered your stitch. You'll pull the working yarn through, creating 2 loops on your finger, grab the working yarn and pull through both, leaving 1 loop on your finger. So 1 loop on my finger goes through the stitch, pull up another loop, pull through both with the working yarn, and single crochet. Now the trick is we don't want our ends to kind of sag or go crooked. So I'm finishing off the second last stitch here, making a single crochet. And what I really wanted to point out is the last stitch is kind of off to the side. So if you don't pick that up, what's going to happen is it's going to kind of go a little bit warped onto the side, and we don't want that. We want the actual panel that we're creating for the pillow to be nice and straight. So just making sure that you're picking up that last stitch. And I just kind of really wanted to show how it's quite deviated to the side. Make your single crochet, and as soon as you're finished with that, make sure that you add 1 stitch. The reason you're doing that actual 1 stitch at the end when you turn your work over is because you've already done a stitch. It's just the way the crochet patterns work. So you're actually going into the 2nd stitch when you're starting a new row, as we're going from right to left. It did take me a long time to figure out, from grabbing that last stitch and making sure that I added a stitch before I turned my work over. But you will pick it up, I promise. But that's how easy this whole pattern is. It's just that single crochet, making sure you're picking up that side one at the end of your row, And again, just making sure that you add a stitch before you turn your work over, and you're good to go. That's all you need for this entire pillow project. I never know how many rows I'm going to need when I do a throw pillow, so I just kind of size it by putting it on the pillow and just kind of measuring and gauging. Once I'm done and I've got enough of my rows completed, the other thing for washability is making sure you tie any little ends into a nice knot, so that way the wool itself won't unravel. The remaining tail portion, I just generally will weave it into the actual panel. I've used 4 skeins of yarn in total, and I'm going to actually make another panel for the back side. Just to add some extra embellishments, what I'm going to use is actually some macrame cord, and this is the 5mm macrame cord in a similar tone color that I'm already using with the actual yarn. So with macrame cord, it's really important to tie a nice secured knot at the bottom and then make your slip stitch, because macrame cord likes to unravel. And I'll just tuck it away when I finish actually putting the panels together. So what I'm doing is I'm stitching it together with the macrame cord, and I kind of making this whole border with it. I just like the fact that it's a different texture, and I just think it looks really nice. I'm grabbing each stitch to match each panel, putting them together, and I'm just doing a simple single crochet all the way around both of the panels, tying them together. Once I get to the corners, I will generally put 2 in the same stitch of a single crochet, and that's actually just going to round out my corners a little bit for the throat. Once I did the 3 sides, I'm going to put the pillow insert in, and then I'm going to finish up my last side. Once you're done, just cut your macrame cord, tie it into a knot, and again, make sure you put a little knot at the end of your macrame cord so that way it doesn't unravel, and then you can actually just weave it in there and you won't even see it. When we reached the stop sign, it really made me want to get out of the car and actually go for the real scenic tour. For this project, I'm going to be using a t-shirt yarn. I love the textures that the t-shirt yarn actually creates, so I thought this would be a great way to practice a throw pillow. And I'm going to be using a 16mm crochet hook, and I'm going to go ahead and make that slip knot to start. And I generally try to make my stitches around the same size as the actual crochet hook. First thing I'll do is go ahead and cast on my stitches, and I wasn't sure how much yarn and how far I could go, so I had to go with 2 different pillow sizes. So I have my 20 and 20 inch, so it's a perfect 20 inches by 20 inches, and then I thought maybe I might have to go for that lumbar size where it's 12 inches and still 20 inches in length. And again, it was because I had a feeling for the amount of t-shirt yarn I had, I didn't think I was going to be able to do a whole 20 by 20 pillow. So what I'm going to do is cast on 30 stitches, because these stitches are going to be a little bit smaller, but the t-shirt yarn is actually very stretchy. It's got an elastine to it. Once I've made my 30 stitches, what I'm going to do is a double crochet. So I have 2 loops. I'm going to make a 3rd loop. Then what you do is you're going to remove 2 loops, then remove 2 more, and that is a double crochet. So again, you have a loop, you're going to yarn over, making a 2nd loop, go through your stitch, you have 3, remove 2 again, and that's a double crochet. You're just adding an extra loop and adding an extra stitch to remove with a double versus the single crochet. So again, you're going to have 2 loops on your hook by yarning over, go through your stitch, remove 2, and that again is the double crochet. This yarn's very thick and it's also very soft to work with. And I like the fact that it actually kind of twists a little bit as you're doing it. Again, it's creating more texture and dimension to what you're actually crocheting. Plus, they come in so many beautiful colors to choose from. So when I yarn over, I'm always kind of holding my crochet hook and the working yarn over before I go into my stitch. And now the working yarn is in my left hand. So as you can see, it's pretty easy to work with a crochet. Now I'm removing 2 and I remove 2 again. That slip knot that you started with, make sure that you add that as a stitch. And with the double crochet, what you want to make sure is that you're going to stitch on another 2 stitches, and then you're going to turn your work over. If you're doing a single crochet, you only need to stitch once, but if you're doing a double, you're going to stitch twice because you've actually made the next stitch. So now that I flip it over, as you can see, I've kind of made these posts. Those extra 2 stitches is you've already created the next post, so you're going into the second stitch when you're going from right to left. So I'm going to do my next row of the double crochets all the way through, but what is a little bit different is instead of going through the 2 top bumps here of my crochet, I'm actually going to go through only 1, and that's going to give it a little bit of a ribbed effect. So you could just go into both if you're more comfortable to do that. That's no problem. It's still going to look fantastic. But I just wanted to kind of give this little ripple end, and that's pretty much how you would do it, is just going into one of those little bumps at the top instead of both of them. The bump that I'm talking about from the top looks like a braid, so you're only going to go into the first half of it. So there's two yarns. It kind of looks like a braid. You're only going to go into the first one. And again, when you get to the end of your crochet row, what you're going to notice is that the end is kind of off to the side. And again, we want to make sure that we're crocheting and the panel itself is going to go nice and straight. So I'm doing the second last double crochet there, and now I'm going to grab that end. And as you can see, it's kind of hard, but if you pull on it, you can grab it. It's way off to the side there. And again, this is what's going to help keep that panel nice and straight. Once you're done your row, don't forget to add 2 stitches. Once you turn your work over, that's actually part of the first post. So all I did was try to gauge how many rows I was going to need, and it was stitching up really, really quickly. I like to check every so often so that way I can gauge how many rows I'm going to need to complete the panel. Once I was finished, I used up pretty much most of the t-shirt yarn that I had, and for your last loop, once you're finished, just cut your yarn, make a nice tight knot, and then you can just weave in the tail. So I was able to make my panel quite long, which will now actually be able to wrap around that lumbar pillow. So it's 20 inches wide and 12 inches in height. So I'm almost there. I have a little bit tiny left over, so I can add a couple more rows, and then I can go and actually stitch around all my edges to put the pillow together. So you could actually weave in the t-shirt yarn to put it together, but I personally just prefer to actually make a nice frame around the crochet. I think it just adds a nice embellishment. Now, because this crochet panel is actually wrapped, I'm only going to need to crochet up 3 sides out of the 4. So I'm going to start with a slip knot. And then I'm going to go in with the same crochet hook, and I'm just going to do a single crochet all the way around the pillow frame. Just like I did with the other one. This type of yarn is a little bit thinner, but I just match up the stitches from both sides, and then I just wrap all the way around with a single crochet. And again, for those corners, I like to add in 2 crochets, 2 single crochets, just to help round it a little bit. So I'm going to put my lumbar pillow in there, and as you can see, the crochet all the way around makes a beautiful frame. I'm going to finish off my last row there, and always remember, if you're working with macrame cord, is to tie a little knot so that way it doesn't unravel. Thank you so much for watching this week's video, and please, if you have any questions and or comments, leave me a comment in the comment box below. I have so many more fun DIYs, room makeovers, and furniture transformations to share with you soon. So if you haven't already, consider subscribing and hit the notification bell. That will tell you when I upload my next video. Until then, take care. I'm really looking forward to seeing you soon.